We now switch over to our Mariners here, who, to continue with what I was sort of pumping up in the beginning of the show about playoffs. Seattle played a bad Washington team and then a Cleveland team that, depending on how the AL Central race goes, we could see this Cleveland team back in the wild card battle. They're not currently there right now because they lead their division, but with the way that they've been playing as of late, the series win that Seattle got, not to spoil things, but the series win that Seattle got this past homestand, Cleveland may be having to deal with a wild card spot. So let's get into that recap here. 2 games against Washington to begin a 6-game homestand, August 23rd and 24th. The 23rd, a 4-2 win. Our player of the game, third baseman Eugenio Suarez, 1 hit, 2 RBIs, 1 run, and a walk. August 24th versus the Nationals, game 2, a 3-1 loss. That one a little hard to stomach, considering that Washington has twice as many losses as they do wins. Excuse me. Our player of the game, center fielder Julio Rodriguez. Julio, 1 hit, 1 run, 1 RBI. It would be the solo homer in the bottom of the 8th that would actually tie the game in the bottom of the 8th. But reliever Paul Sewald would give up a 2-run homer in the top of the 9th, and Seattle would be unable to rally and come back from that one. So that's a tough series. This is a Washington baseball team that, as I mentioned, they're not necessarily a good team on the record books, but it's baseball. You play 162 games. Eventually, you're going to have to lose a few here and there, right? And even to the bad teams. So we shift our focus from that Washington 2-game stretch over to this 4-game slot against the Cleveland Guardians. Cleveland, a good team. They're leading their division right now. They're 2 games ahead of the Minnesota Twins. They've got a lot of talent. They're very similar to Seattle in a lot of regards. They've got good pitching. They don't strike out a lot. Well, not in that regard, but they're similar in many different forms. We look towards that series here beginning on the 25th of August, which was a game on YouTube TV versus Cleveland, a 3-1 win in that first game of the series. Our player of the game, Mitch Haniger, would have the 3-run homer in the bottom of the first. That would be the only runs for Seattle, and Seattle would never give up that lead. He would also be the YouTube player of the game. As I mentioned, that game was streamed on YouTube. On the 26th, that game on Friday versus the Guardians, a 3-2 win. This game going into 11 innings. Once again, our player of the game is Mitch Haniger, as he had the walk-off single in the bottom of the 11th to send that game home to take the 2-game series lead against Cleveland. August 27th versus Cleveland, the day that Ichiro Suzuki was inducted into the Mariners Hall of Fame, which we will talk about more in depth here in a minute. Unfortunately, a 4-3 loss. The Mariners could not get the win for Ichiro that night, as well as with the rest of the Mariners, almost all of the Mariners Hall of Fame in the building. Our player of the game, pitcher Luis Castillo, the new Mariner, well, relatively new Mariner, put on a great performance, only allowing 1 run through 6 innings pitched, but ultimately couldn't get the win despite the great pitching. On the 28th, to wrap up the series on Sunday, the Mariners would beat Cleveland 4-0, so a nice shutout victory. Our player of the game, pitcher Robbie Ray going 7 innings, 3 hits, no runs, no walks, and 7 strikeouts. This matchup on the 28th was a little difficult because you come off of that win against come off of that loss, on the 27th. Seattle hit 3 solo home runs, and that was historic, not in a good way, as the Mariners became the first team since 1903 to have 3 homers in a game and no other base runners. That's 1903. That's in any capacity, that's pretty wild. So you can see the limited number of hits kind of stacking up, and to that point, the Mariners have the lowest amount of hits in the entirety of the league since the All-Star break. This is an issue that Seattle will need to address, whether it's the coaching staff, whether it's certain slumps from players like Ty France, like Cal Raleigh, stuff like that. Those sort of issues will need to be addressed, if you really want to stay in that playoff race, if you want to take the number 1 wild card spot and hold on to it, host those 2 to 3 games at home here at T-Mobile Park. We look over here. to players of the week, pardon me. Julio Rodriguez, pardon me, Mitch Haniger had the big week, at least for me. I know that we look to the batting average here, a little bit lower, 208. But the reason that I went with Mitch was just that since returning from the injured list, Mitch has about 2 or 3 games out of 21 that he hasn't hit safely. 3 out of 21. I mean, those are pretty good numbers. And you see just the value that he's able to bring because of that, being able to hit safely, being able to be a spot in the batting order that's not an automatic out. In addition to his offensive numbers, there was an important play yesterday where Haniger caught a fly out. Robbie Ray was in a bit of trouble. Easily, it could have been a sac fly that would have scored a runner from third base, but Mitch had a really great throw to hold the runner at third. Just shows a little bit of what Mitch can do defensively, just the value that he adds in your order when healthy. So it's great to have Mitch back. Long story short. We look over to some injury-related news. Injury news never fun. On the 25th, Ty France left the game against Cleveland with a right calf bruise after a collision at first base with Jose Ramirez. Both two pretty sizable guys running into each other is not good. And then later on in that game, Will Benson, a player for Cleveland, actually clipped Ty's leg and just further aggravated it, so he had to miss the rest of that game. Ty would come back and play the rest of the series, and he seems fine. So luckily, that's not a long-term and or serious injury, but definitely a scare there. And the 28th, J.P. Crawford was out with a pectoral injury. Scott Service wasn't entirely sure where that came from, but he's considered day-to-day. Luckily, Seattle's got that day off today, so get some extra rest there, but it doesn't seem like it's going to hold out Crawford for much of a long time period. Heading over to Team Nose, and this is where things get exciting for Mariners fans. Before I get to a big contract here, we'll still talk about Julio. On the 25th, Rodriguez would join the 2020 club. If you're unaware, that is 20 homers and 20 stolen bases. Rodriguez becomes the 6th Mariner in franchise history to achieve the feat, and the first since Mike Cammy, back in 2002. He becomes the 12th rookie in all of MLB history to accomplish that mark in a single season. So Julio this week set some history, and we'll get to the second part of that, but really cool to see Julio join that club. You figured it was a matter of time. Will he join 30-30? I don't know. And then also on the 25th, the starter for the day, George Kirby, in that game against Cleveland, set an MLB record. Kirby throws 24 consecutive strikes to begin the game, the most ever to begin an MLB game. Impressive to see what Kirby has done this year, especially considering that he never pitched in AAA. Didn't start the year as the 5th starter, but has mitigated some tough outings here and there against good ball clubs like Houston. Otherwise, Kirby has been pretty solid. I know that at the beginning of the year, I was a little worried you didn't have a veteran starter as your 5th guy. I looked at Tyler Anderson, someone that was a starter last year for Seattle. This year, he went in free agency to the Dodgers, and he was an all-star. So it's like, hey, why didn't we bring him back? But Kirby, I'm okay with it with Kirby. He's been able to help, I guess, curb my enthusiasm and really settle in there as that starter. Obviously, the big news around the Mariners is Julio's contract. Julio Rodriguez signing a major deal that's really intricate. And I don't want to say it's just in so-and-so years and so-and-so money, because it's more than that. It's a really unique contract for a really unique player. So let's break that down. This deal can be 4 different terms of length: 8 years, 13 years, 16 years, or 18 years. That's a long period of time. So on that, just to base it, Seattle will have Julio Rodriguez in a Mariners uniform for a decent amount of time. You don't have to worry about that. It guarantees Julio at least $210 million. If it is maxed out to it, the maximum that Julio can get from this contract is $470 million. So we look at that. The base of the deal is 8 years and $120 million. It includes this season and goes all the way through 2029. After the 2028 season, Seattle will need to decide if they want to pick up his club option. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The club option, the size and the length of that option depend on where Julio places in MVP voting. The option is either for 8 or 10 years on top of that original 8-year deal. Depending on how Rodriguez fares in MVP voting, whether it's wins and or finishes, it can range anywhere from $200 million to $350 million. If Seattle picks up that very option, Julio's guarantee in the deal is at least $320 million. This is where it becomes funny money. I mean, it's hard to quantify $100 million, let alone 320. If Seattle decides to not pick up that option after year 7, Julio has a player option after year 8 that's 5 years and $90 million. So that would create the 13-year structure and $210 million floor. He could turn it down and hit free agency right after he becomes 30 years old, which I kind of doubt. The likeliest outcome is that Julio will be in the Mariners uniform through 2037 and makes at least $320 million. This also includes a full no trade clause. So that's a mouthful. I'll let you digest that. That's a lot. That's a lot of money. And it's a lot of time for Julio to be a Mariner. Just for reference, Julio and I are the same age. We're both 21 years old. I didn't get the same athleticism and looks as he did, but it's hard to quantify the age that this guy is, the talent that he has, and the love that he has for his city. In a press conference, a press release by the Mariners, Julio essentially said that I wanted to be in Seattle. I want to win with this team, and I want to win for these fans. If that doesn't get you excited for Julio, for Mariners baseball, and doesn't make you a fan of the guy, I don't know what else will. As a guy who's been a consistent optimist of this team and this ball club, you get the comments whenever there's a star player for Seattle that, oh, he'll go somewhere else, he'll get traded, which I admit has happened. Baseball greats like Adam Jones, David Ortiz were in the Mariners organization at a period of time, and then they got traded away. I understand that happened in the past, but this is a different organization. Julio is a different player. So to get him for at least 8 years is a great thing. I know that this has been a cry that people have had to get Julio extended for a period of time, and it's great to see that happen. So at the end of the day, it's a great thing. Seattle's paying him about 15 or so million a year, which is pretty solid, for a superstar of his caliber, and especially considering that he's only going to continue to grow exponentially. So all in all, a solid deal. Going from that to a different outfielder over the past week, as we mentioned on the 27th, Mariners great Ichiro Suzuki was inducted into the team's Hall of Fame. He becomes the 10th member of the Hall of Fame, joining former teammates Ken Griffey Jr., Edgar Martinez, Jay Buhner, Dan Wilson. It was an incredible ceremony, to have all of those members of the Hall of Fame, except for Jay Buhner, Lou Piniella, and Randy Johnson present from the Mariners Hall of Fame. Different players from his past. Raul Ibanez was there and got a loud Raul chant from the crowd. Near sold-out crowd. Several of the Cleveland players were in the dugout watching it as it took place. Ichiro, not a native English speaker, had a 7-minute speech and totally rocked it. I mean, it was a great speech filled with laughs, commemorating other players like Ken Griffey Jr., who he shares a special bond with. Julio Rodriguez brought Ichiro flowers out before the speech took place. It was a special pregame ceremony to honor a truly special player. I'll show you a great shot that our photographer here, Liv Lyons, got of Ichiro. There are several other great photos, and we'll have an article out for you to really document the ceremony. But all in all, a really special moment and really great. There were some moments that, I will admit to you, I got a little emotional about seeing signs in the crowd like, "We named our son after you." Liv, as I mentioned, Liv Lyons shared a story that Liv learned Japanese because of Ichiro and just set apart. Ichiro became the first position player in all of Major League Baseball from Japan. There were pitchers, but never a position player. And man, it was for a guy that I didn't grow up with Griffey when he was in his prime. I basically grew up with this guy in his prime, and to be there for this ceremony, thank you to Converge for our partnership and to get us there for these Mariner games, right? It was a special moment. It was a very special moment. And it's incredible to know that Ichiro still plays such a big part within the organization as an assistant to the chairman, which basically means Ichiro gets to be around the organization, train with them. The guy still looks like he can play. I'll tell you that admittedly, he could still play. All in all, a special ceremony to celebrate a special player. And I can confirm with you that a statue and his number being retired are coming. That's just got to go through once Ichiro gets inducted into Cooperstown, the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. That is when that can happen officially. It's not confirmed that it'll happen the year he gets inducted into the Hall of Fame, a year after. That's just the criteria that the Mariners organization sets. Once you hit Hall of Fame, is then we can retire stuff like that. And so that's coming. I know I've been curious about when we see his 51 retired. Maybe it's a split retirement with Randy Johnson, and when we see an Ichiro statue. But those are coming. It's just got to be when he hits Cooperstown. And even representatives from the Hall of Fame said that this is just a matter of time before this comes out. So it was, long story short, you can tell it was a special moment. We continue over here with some league-related notes, just some smaller things. On the 23rd, the Angels could be put up for sale. Owner Arte Moreno has owned the Angels since 2003. In a quote, he said, "I have ultimately come to the conclusion that now is the time." So this is interesting, especially considering that it's intra-division, because it sort of seems like we could see Mike Trout traded, Shohei Ohtani could get traded, or in a different light, we could see the new owner sign Ohtani to a mega extension and keep the team together. That'll all be decided once the team is sold, but just to keep that on your monitor that the Angels could be put up for sale. Probably will change ownership. Also announced that with the coming of the 2023 MLB season, which we'll showcase for you next week, Major League Baseball will participate in the Korea Series, which is a series from November 9th through 16th, where MLB players and KBO players, Korean Baseball Organization, will have a sort of series there over in South Korea. It is the first time that the league is traveling to South Korea since 1922. So that'll be cool to keep an eye on. There are some fun stories of KBO players that came to the United States and players from the United States that went over to the KBO. So that'll be really cool to see how baseball is trying to grow the sport internationally. I almost said nationally. My apologies. We look over here to the standings and record of the team, as well as what's upcoming for the Mariners. So Seattle will go on the road now to play in the Midwest, the Tigers and this same Guardians team, as the Mariners hold a 70-win, 58-loss record. They are still second in the American League West. They currently hold the second wild card spot in the American League. They're a half game behind Tampa Bay for the first overall wild card spot. Tampa Bay holds the tiebreaker over the Mariners because Tampa Bay has a better record this year against us. And then the Mariners are a game ahead of the Blue Jays, and the Mariners hold the tiebreaker against the Blue Jays. So these are important things to note once we get to playoff time, but, that's a little bit away. Looking towards the next series, Seattle has today off, and then they go to Detroit to play the Tigers from August 30th to September 1st. The August 30th and 31st games are 4:10 p.m. first pitch times. September 1st is a 10:10 a.m. first pitch time. Then they travel over to Cleveland to play this Guardians team. Again, that could be who Seattle is battling for a wild card spot, who they're jockeying for a wild card spot for. That takes place from September 2nd through 4th. September 2nd is a 4:10 first pitch. September 3rd is a 4:15 first 10 pitch. And then September 4th is an 11:10 a.m. PS time first pitch. My apologies. So Big opportunity for Seattle to take advantage of a bad Detroit team, and then another tough challenge against this Cleveland team that I'm sure will try to exact some revenge against you.